The shares were up 2.3% at $107.23 in after-hour trading on Wall Street. So I thought we would throw that in, and now we'll jump back to the U.S. and we'll return to do the markets. Excuse me. But to the U.S., this is national income product accounts, gross national product, Q1, the first quarter 2015. This is the third estimate. Gross national product, the value of productions of goods and services in the U.S. adjusted for price changes decreased at an annual rate of 0.2% in the first quarter of 2015, according to the third estimate released by the Bureau of Economic Analysis. In the fourth quarter, real GNP increased 2.2%. The GNP estimate released today is based on a more complete source of data, as it normally is when we see these reports over time. The third estimates, that is. The annual revised national income product accounts will be released along with the advanced estimate for GNP for second quarter on July the 30th. Real GNP decreased 0.2% in Q1, in contrast to an increase of 2.2% in Q4. The downturn in percentage change in real GNP reflects a deterioration in PCE and a downturn in exports and non-residential fixed investments in state and local governments. The price index for gross domestic purchases, which measures purchases paid by U.S. residents, decreased 1.6% in Q1, the same decrease as in the second estimate. This index of domestic purchases increased 0.1% compared, excluding food and energy, compared with 0.7%. Real personal consumption expenditures increased 2.1% in Q1, compared with an increase of 4.4% in Q4. Durable goods increased 1.3%, compared with an increase of 0.2%. That would have been in Q4. Non-durable goods increased 0.8%, compared with an increase of 1.4%. Services increased 2.7%, compared with an increase of 4.2%. That would be in Q4. Real non-residential fixed investment decreased 2% in the first quarter, in contrast to an increase of 4.7% in Q4. Investment in non-residential structures decreased 18.8%, in contrast to an increase of 5.9% in Q4. Investment in equipment increased. That was a decrease now, incidentally, of 8.9%. The in equipment increased 2.6%, compared with an increase of 0.6% in Q4. Investment in intellectual property increased to 4.9%, that is prosperity, compared with an increase of, not exactly, of 10.3% in Q4. Real residential fixed investment increased 6.5%, compared with, and this actually is, of 3.8%. Real exports of goods and services decreased 5.9% in Q1, in contrast to an increase of 4.5% in Q4. Real imports of goods and services increased 7.1% in compared with an increase of 10.4% in Q4. Real federal government consumption expenditures and gross investment was unchanged in the first quarter, contrasts to a decrease of 7.3% in Q4. National defense decreased 1.2%, compared with a decrease of 12.2% in Q4. Non-defense increased 2% compared with an increase of 1.5%. Real estate and local government consumption expenditures and gross investment decreased 1% in contrast to an increase of 1.6%. Changes in real private inventories added 0.45% to the first quarter. Charge in real GMP after subtracting 0.10% from the fourth quarter. Private business increased inventory to 99.5 billion in Q1, following an increase of 80 billion in Q4 and 82.2 billion in Q3. That was 2014. Real final sales of domestic product, GMP, less charge in private investments decreased by 0.6% in Q1, in contrast to an increase of 2.3% in Q4. Gross domestic purchases by U.S. government residents there increased to 1.7% in the first quarter compared with an increase of 2.2% in the fourth quarter. That again is real gross domestic purchases. Gross national product, goods and services produced by labor and property supplied by U.S. residents decreased 1% in Q1 in contrast to an increase of 1.4% in Q4. GMP includes and GOP excludes net receipts of income from the rest of the world, which decreased by 30.5 billion in Q1 compared with a decrease of 30.7 billion in Q4. First quarter receipts decreased by 30.8 billion and payments decreased by 0.3 billion. Current dollar GMP, the market value of products and goods and services in the U.S. decreased 0.2 or 10.4 billion in the first quarter to a level of 17,693.3 billion. In the fourth quarter, current dollar GMP increased by 2.4%, or 103.9 billion. Gross domestic income, which measures the value of products and goods and services in the U.S. as the costs incurred in income earned in production, increased 1.9% in the first quarter, compared with an increase of 3.7% in the fourth quarter. For a given quarter, the estimate of GMP and GDI may differ for various reasons, including the incorporation of largely independent source data. Revisions: the third quarter estimate of the first quarter percentage change in GMP is 0.5% or 23.6 billion more than the second estimate issued last month, primarily reflecting an upward revision to exports, to personal consumption expenditures, to private inventory investment, and to non-residential fixed investment in state and local governments spending that were partially offset by an upward revision to imports. And corporate profits. Profits from current production, corporate profits with inventory valuation and adjustment, that is IVA, and capital consumption adjustment, decreased 110.8 billion in the first quarter, compared with a decrease of 30.4 billion in the fourth quarter. Profits of domestic financial corporations decreased 2.1 billion in the first quarter, compared with a decrease of 12.5 billion in the fourth quarter. Profits of domestic non-financial corporations decreased $79.6 billion, in contrast to an increase of $18.1 billion in the fourth quarter. The rest of the world component of profits decreased by $29 billion compared with a decrease of $36.1 billion. This measure is calculated as the difference between receipts from the rest of the world and payments to the rest of the world. In the first quarter, receipts decreased by $40 billion and payments decreased by $11 billion. Taxes on corporate income increased $25.3 billion in the first quarter, in contrast to a decrease of $4.8 billion in the fourth quarter. A decrease of $4.8 billion in the fourth quarter. Profits after taxes with the IVA decreased $36.1 billion compared with a decrease of $25.8 billion. The first quarter charges in taxes on corporate income mainly reflected the expiration of bonus depreciation provisions. Dividends increased $5.8 billion in the first quarter compared with an increase of $18.6 billion in the fourth. Undistributed profits decreased by $141.8 billion compared with a decrease of $44.3 billion. Net cash flow with IVA, the internal funds available to corporations for investment, decreased by $135.7 billion, in contrast to an increase of $12.2 billion. The IVA and CCAD are adjustments that converse income withdrawals and inventory withdrawals and depreciation of fixed assets reported on a tax form. Historic cost basis to the current cost measurement used in the national income and product accounts. The IVA increased $29 billion in the first quarter compared with an increase of $27.5 billion in the fourth quarter. The CDAD decreased $218.8 billion in contrast to an increase of $3.9 billion in Q4. The first quarter change mainly reflected the expiration of bonus depreciation. We talked about that before, and let's sum this up with bonus depreciation. The impact of bonus depreciation on first quarter of 2015. The first quarter changes in taxes on corporate income and in capital consumption adjustment, that is the CDCAD, mainly reflects the expiration of both the 50% bonus depreciation provision and increased Section 179 expensing limit claimed on the extension of the 2010 taxes. Remember those? The BA estimate of profits from current production are not affected by these tax acts because profits from current production do not depend on depreciation accounting practices from the federal income tax proposals. Profits of domestic financial corporations increased $18.9 billion in Q1, in contrast to a decrease of $13 billion in Q4. Profits of domestic non-financial corporations increased $118.2 billion compared with an increase of $14.7 billion in Q4. The first quarter increase in profits of non-financial corporations reflects widespread increases across detailed industries. The largest contributor was manufacturing. Gross value added non-financial domestic corporate business. Real gross value added non-financial corporations increased in the fourth quarter. Profits